So what did you guys think? Amazing film. Please welcome producer Derik Murray, director Reginald Hudlin, and producer Oprah Winfrey. So I guess you guys like the film. Welcome, all three of you. Reginald, I want to start with you. When I was watching the film, I was so inspired by his journey. The fact that he's constantly evolving, even after he's won the Oscar and he is on top of the world, he keeps evolving, he keeps changing, he keeps learning. Can you tell us about articulating that side of the story?
I'm just going to quote Sidney again, or paraphrase, which is that he goes, when I was a kid, I had a lot of curiosity and it got me in a lot of trouble. He was hanging out with some rough and tumble kids. They stole from a pumpkin patch and almost went to, you know, the Little Big House. Yeah. And his father said, "You got to go," and picked him up and put him on a boat at 14? 15, and said, "Go to America." Can you imagine putting your child on a boat at 15 by himself?
But he knew his brother was there.
Yeah, on the other side, though.
On the other side, yeah.
But there was water in between.
That is true. But he knew he was going to send him to the brother's house, right?
Yes,
okay.
I would,
okay.
As a helicopter parent of the modern age.
Now that would be hard, yes.
So anyway, the point is, his quest for knowledge, his quest for self-improvement never, ever stopped. One of the many lessons that we can all take from him.
And Oprah, one of the things that I was, a fact that I didn't know, the fact that he grew up in Cat Island and there was no notion of race.
Oh, I love that.
And to me, watching the story, was that both a blessing, but also, you know,
the greatest blessing. Let me just stop you right there. It was the greatest blessing because his identity was formed based on his humanity, not on the color of his skin. And so one of my favorite moments in this film is when he says, "I didn't know what a mirror was." When he is walking down the street and for the first time sees that woman in the image and imitating itself, and then goes back the next day and realizes that's me in that mirror. So when you grow up first of all, you grow up in a community where you're surrounded by people who look like you. I think this is what people who are not people of color, meaning white people, don't understand. People who are not people of color don't understand what you take for granted. You have taken for granted your whole life, walking down the street, seeing on billboards, seeing on the backs of buses, seeing on television, seeing in advertising, seeing the world reflect you back to you. So he grew up in a community where he was reflected back to himself in his friends and family and cousins and neighbors. And so when that happens, it solidifies your identity and solidifies your sense of humanity and who you are, as opposed to being in a country that says you're not who you think you are and you're not good enough to come to my front door. So that is why when he goes to the front door, which I also love that story, he goes to the front door, he can't even understand, "Ma'am, don't you love that moment?"
The best.
When he says,
I decided.
Why would I go to the back door when you're here? That doesn't make any sense. So I'm just gonna leave it here on the step. And then gets home that night and the Klan has visited.
Right. And the thing about that is that for all the things he didn't have running water, he didn't have electricity.
Yeah.
But he had love from his parents, he had moral guidance and drive from his parents, and he had a sense of self-worth that was inherent. It wasn't a compensating sense of self-worth. It was like, well, of course, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. And that was enough. And I mean, I grew up in East St. Louis, which is an all-black town, right?
Right.
So I mean, the head of the fire department lived next door to me. So I had some degree of what he had, but I still lived in America, and television was what it was. And
there were no images of people that looked like you on television.
right, and if I left East St. Louis, then I was in a very hostile territory. So it was not something, being on Cat Island was a very unique circumstance that was to his advantage.
Yes. I want to ask you, Reginald, we mentioned a little bit outside that I was blown away cinematically. The fact that Sidney Poitier, you choose, we see him eye to eye. He's looking directly at the camera. Everybody else, quarter turn away, and it's so powerful. We feel so intimate, connected with Sidney. Can you talk about those choices?
Oh, that choice was Miss Winfrey's. Because she shot, through her masterclass series, she did this amazing interview with Mr. Poitier. And because it was Sidney, she said, no, I'll be there. And she was like, no, you're not asking the right questions.
I know, I kind of was very bossy that day. So I ended up taking over the interview. We had this series on OWN called Masterclass, and when Sidney agreed to do it, I went to the studio just to support him, and then I didn't like the way the other guy was doing it. So then I put myself in because I know all the stories. I knew all the stories, and I ended up interviewing him for 2 days. So that was an 8-hour interview. We did like 4.5 hours and then came back the next day and did another 4.5 hours.
But the choice of the connecting eye to eye, which in cinema, as I said, we normally
look directly down the barrel of the camera.
Correct,
yes.
a quarter turn. But the intimacy that we see in this film with Sidney, he's looking directly in our eyes.
Yes.
And we create a connection.
Well, that's on purpose. We're doing that on purpose because when I was doing the masterclass series, you wanted it to look like the person was speaking directly to the audience as you're watching at home. And he, fortunately, had said to me, "You're only allowed to run this one time. You can't out-air it more than one time because this is all I have, is my story, and this is all my family will have of me when I'm gone. So you're not allowed to put it on your air and run it and rerun it and rerun it." And so it is only through the family's permission that I was allowed to give that footage to Derik. and to Reginald. So that's how that happened.
And Derik, you instigated all of this. You started it many years before. You're the culprit. Tell us about the genesis. You did an extreme amount of research, prior to having Reginald and Oprah involved. Can you tell us about the journey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, my research and my inspiration started when I was about 10 years old in a theater, which is where I met Sidney Poitier for the first time, staring up at the screen at this incredible man into Sir with Love, and followed shortly thereafter by In the Heat of the Night. To me, he was a hero. He wasn't a black man, he was a hero. He was dynamic, he was respectful, he had confidence. No matter what got in his way, he was gonna face it head on. That started for me when I was 10, and I revisited those films throughout my life, and as my career transformed into being a filmmaker and telling the stories of many great iconic individuals, one day I just did a little bit of research about my hero, and there hadn't been this seminal film about Sidney Poitier. And I have to tell you, it wasn't like I was like, oh, that sounds like a great opportunity. I was kind of pissed off about it, actually. And so fortunately through friends and neighbors and countrymen, I had an opportunity to be introduced to the Poitiers and sat with Sidney and his wife Joanna and their children in the living room and spent some time with them and built some trust. One of the most important things was a film that I had produced on Muhammad Ali called Facing Ali, which was done with Lonnie and Muhammad and was shortlisted for an Academy Award. That was one of Sidney's and Joanna's favorite movies. So that helped click. And from there, the trust was built. And then, quite frankly, the mission then was to put the team together, to put the A-team together, to put the team together that Sidney deserved. It started with Reggie, and over time, we arrived on Oprah's doorstep. And on June 12th, 2020, funny how I remember that date, we did a Zoom with Oprah. Reggie presented, I said a few words, probably stumbled most of the time, and 50 minutes in, Oprah said, "I'm in, whatever it takes," and here we are.
Reginald, I mentioned this outside. I love the fact that we hear his voice, and there's a musicality to Sidney Poitier's voice that you honor. Even the silences are so potent in the documentary. Can you tell us?
The silences are everything. And I mean, for me, watching those interviews over and over again, I always just think of Miles Davis, right? Because for Miles Davis, the silences were as important as the notes he played. It's when don't you play? And when he talks about, you know, if I were the sun, you know, and then he pauses, and also my dad. And you just go, ah. And I mean, again, it's the power of his voice, the power of the rhythm and the cadence of what he does. I mean, he uses his instrument impeccably.
No, it's extremely powerful. Oprah, I was so struck by what you said at the end of the documentary. I am part of his legacy. It's so moving. And my point was that you closed the film, and in such a strong note. Was that always planned?
No, because I'd seen many cuts where I wasn't closing. But that was a very nice ending. Thank you. Very good choice. Very good choice.
But give them the whole quote from Maya.
Oh, okay. So, thank you. We're our own little show here, we know. So when I'd opened my school in South Africa and I'd come back to Maya's house because she wasn't able to come to the opening in 2007, and she was sitting at the counter teaching me to make biscuits. Didn't work so well, but she was saying, "Watch me now, how to make biscuits." And I said, "Oh, Maya, you are," I said, that school is going to be my greatest legacy." And she said, "You have no idea what your legacy is going to be." And I said, "Oh, no, for sure. It's going to be those girls in that school, because I'm telling you, it was phenomenal." And so she put the dough down and she turned to me and said, "I said you have no idea what your legacy will be." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Because your legacy is never one thing. Your legacy is every life you touch." And so that just pierced me, and I realized that is true for me, and it's true for every one of us here in this room. It's every life you have touched and will touch, because every life you touch, you leave a heart print there. And so Sidney's life, from the time I was 10 years old, that story, and watching him on my linoleum floor, him watching him in the theater, I was transformed in that moment. Because if you go back to 1964 and where Black people were in the world in 1964, in seeing the possibility of your life, there wasn't one. My grandmother always thought I was going to grow up and be, as she was, a domestic worker, as my mother was, a domestic worker. They couldn't see beyond that. And the reason I was sitting on the linoleum floor is because my mother was out working, taking care of white people's houses and white people's children, because she couldn't be there with me and her two other children. And so I was left to babysit that night when the Oscars were on. And I saw Sidney Poitier. It was the first time I had seen a Black man, we were called colored at the time, get out of a limousine and nobody was dead. It was just like, whoa, this is unbelievable. And it was so rare at the time to see Black people on TV that whenever there was somebody on, remember when the Supremes were on the first, you spend all your time calling everybody, color people on, color people, turn on right now, Channel 7, turn on. And so I started calling everybody I knew, and then he ends up winning the Academy Award. And I remember in that moment thinking, whoa, this has happened. And if that could happen to him, what could happen to me? So it just opened this door of what could be possible. And When you are given the opportunity to dream of something bigger than the life that's in front of you, that's hope.
Yeah.
That's hope.
Derik, the documentary maintains enough distance to cover the complex aspects of his life. You touch upon the Diane Carroll situation and also the Uncle Tom accusations on his career. Did you have any pushback from the family about certain subjects that you shouldn't deal with?
Absolutely zero. Right from the very beginning, there was actually no discussion about wanting to have control or that any aspects of his life would not be shared within the film. And that continued throughout. In fact, the family was not involved in cuts and making suggestions.
Tell everybody what Joanna said when you showed it to them.
All right. So when we had completed the rough cut, and it was a rough cut, there was a lot more of Reggie's finishing to happen and all the sweetening and the beautiful things that we all love about the movie. I took my iPad down to Joanna and Sidney's home. Sidney, of course, had passed, and sat with Joanna and her two daughters, Anika and Sidney, who you've seen, who are so brilliant in the movie, and showed them the movie on an iPad sitting in the living room. So that 111-minute movie that you just saw took well over 3 hours. There were stops, breaks, crying, hugging, walking out, coming back, sitting down. And when we got to the end of the movie, there was a giant hug by the family. They were sitting on a couch. I was sitting here. Then Joanna leaned forward and looked at me and said, "Sidney would love this. It's perfect."
That's the best you can do.
Yeah.
You cannot do any better than that.
Yeah.
Reginald, one of the things that struck me when I was watching the film is that everybody speaks about Sidney in the present tense.
Yes.
Was that a determined choice that you made?
Well, 90% of the interviews were done before he passed away. We had been working on the film for years beforehand, which very grateful for many reasons. Because, Sidney was still with us. And they didn't switch into reverent testimony. They talked about their friend. They talked about their colleague.
Yeah.
They talked about, so it was a different tone of conversation.
Yeah, it would have been different if he had already passed.
Very different. Yeah. And, look, people love Sidney. So you talk about someone you love, but again, they are friends. When I talked to Harry Belafonte, and they were like, well, Reggie, maybe you'll get 20 minutes of, because it was deep COVID, right? So we said, we'll do an audio interview, that's fine. But I said, well, 20 minutes, I'm friends with Harry. Come on now, Reggie. So 2 hours later, because you're talking and he's telling stories and he's having a great time and I'm familiar enough with the world that he's describing that every time he gives me a little detail or nuance, I'm like, whoa, back up. Let's go, and we just had a fun afternoon. And that was the experience with everyone. With Morgan, we did, with Barbara. Barbara was lovely we finished. And then she says, okay, now I'm going to have some, matzo ball soup for dinner. I was like, I want some matzo ball soup. So the next day she sent me some matzo ball soup. How lovely.
This is the magic of Reggie, though, what he's just describing, which was on and on. And I knew this from my experience when we first met many years prior. I knew that when Reggie sat with these folks, it would be a conversation. It wouldn't be like an interview where there's a sheet of questions and he would go back and forth. It'd be a true conversation back and forth, and he would inspire them and back. And that's what happened. And you saw that happen in the film constantly.
There's so many facts that are new to the people watching the film, and one of them that I was blown away is his directorial. I was aware that he, of course, did Stir Crazy, but this is the man.
Which is still the funniest thing on earth. I watched it twice this year just because I'd seen the clip in the film, and Go home and watch it. It is the funniest thing.
But
really.
the thing is that we all know that he knocked the door open to the Denzel Washingtons of the world. But the fact that he also knocked the door open to the Spike Lees, to the Reginald Hudlins of the world, it's just amazing. I mean, this Stir Crazy was $100 million.
Yeah, but even before that, I mean, I saw, from Defiant Ones, through all the classics with my family on, sitting in a linoleum like you, right, sitting at home. But I was finally old enough to go to the movies by myself by the time that Buck and the Preacher came out. So I took the bus from East St. Louis to St. Louis, went to the Lowell State Theater, and that's where I was all day, because you're not just going to watch a movie once. You're not getting your money's worth if you only see it one time. So I came in the morning, I left at night, and they had posters, right? Because it was the opening weekend, and I got a Buck and the Preacher poster, and and it had the credit block on it. It's directed by Sidney Poitier, and I was like, he made the movie. He made the movie. And he made a movie my kind of movie, foot to ass. Well, he applied foot to ass of people who needed a foot in their ass.
Okay, got it.
So later, when Quentin Tarantino said, hey, I want to do a Western, let's do Django Unchained, I said, yes, but we have to put at least as much foot to ass as Sidney Poitier did.
In Buck and the Preacher.
Which in itself, he was rectifying the Hollywood wrong that we had not seen African Americans in the Western.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time that there was a serious look at an enormous part of American history. But that is Sidney's life's mission. I mean, when you think about the history of cinema, right, almost from its beginnings, from Birth of a Nation, you have, horrific stereotypical images, right, that depict black people as subhuman, stupid at best and evil at worst. And single-handedly, in movie after movie over the decades, he smashes all those stereotypes single-handedly. He's an extraordinary achievement in itself. Again, all the people you touch. So all over the world, people said, wait, black people are not just human, they're heroic, and they're intelligent, and they're courageous, and they have integrity. Oh, so suddenly, and they can direct movies, so that makes me possible, and that makes Oprah possible, and that makes Barack Obama possible. He makes it all possible.
I will say this, for me, his canon of work is most extraordinary, and the path that he paved for certainly people like Reginald and myself, extraordinary, cannot be compared to anyone. But his glowing, transcendent humanity was the thing that attracted me to him. I will tell you, he made me want to be a better person. There was never a time that I ever spent a moment with him, and I think I talk on here about calling him every Sunday. There wasn't a conversation or an encounter that I ever had that I did not come away expanded, more open, with more clarity, with more willingness to be more human myself. And because I literally was able to sit at his feet and not just witness him talk about this, but witness how he treated everybody. If you went out to a restaurant with him, the guy who comes up to pour the water, he's having a conversation about where he's from and if you're married and who your friends are. If he's parking his car, the valet guy, there is not a person he ever encountered that he did not fully see. And so watching somebody do that, watching him be so fully himself, so fully human, made me want to be more of that. I want some of that. I want to be able to make somebody feel the way he makes me feel and everybody else feel when they come into his space. You feel fully seen because he is so fully present, which is the greatest gift you can give to anybody, is your full presence, is to actually be in the room and be there with them in the room when they're there. Because so many people are someplace else. That was his power. That was his power.
It's such an eventful life. Derik, was it a challenge to pack everything in?
I was just going to say it could easily be a 10-part series. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg of Sidney Poitier, and I really encourage you to look deeper into his life with his books, his audio recordings. There's amazing content out there on this incredible man, this inspiring icon. But gosh, it could have been a 10-part series easily.
Yeah, I mean, you could do 2 hours critiquing the movies. You can do, you can do 2 hours talking about his impact on the world. I mean, any given part of it. But I said, no, let's make 2 hours and let's make hard choices. Let's put on our big boy pants and make it about the man. That's why it's called Sidney, right? We're going to take an intimate look at him, and we're going to take him off the pedestal, and we're going to put him alongside of us, not above us. And we're going to look at him as a human being.
But even when you take him off the pedestal, he's still on the pedestal.
Well, no.
Okay.
Well, that's how you know how big he is.
Yeah, because even when you take him off the pedestal.
Because you just go, oh, you really are a superhero. You really are, when we look at your full humanity, we are nothing but inspired.
But even in that harshest moment, which I thought you did so beautifully, when Juanita is saying, he wanted an apartment because he wanted to go right and he wanted to get away, but it turned out to be more than that, and then you just fade to black. So you can feel her pain, but also you are inspired by her dignity not to go any further, because anybody who belongs to that club knows that there's a lot to go there,
Right.
So I thought that was a beautiful choice.
And it was because when she said it, it was like a tidal wave of emotion that hit me.
No, I know when she said it, you went, woo, bingo, got that.
Right, and then I said,
She said it, you did the same thing you did when I started crying, and I was like, okay, please stop the camera. And you're like, oh no, I got you now. We're gonna keep rolling. Yeah. Right?
oh yes. But the problem was,
Yes.
but I didn't ask a follow-up question
That's right. That's good.
because that would be rude.
That would have been really bad.
However, it
Because she
was
said
5
it
minutes
and
later.
she
She
said
said
what
it.
she needed to
There was
say.
no
and
more words.
Wasn't that classy? Didn't you all think that was so classy?
Pretty amazing.
So classy the way she handled it.
Reginald, each daughter, I was blown away by the fact that each daughter speaks about him completely different from each other. Yeah. Was that something that you orchestrated, or?
That's who they are. I mean, this is what's amazing. He has all these beautiful daughters. They're all intelligent. They're all warm and wonderful. They all have clearly their own unique relationship to their father. They have their own insights to who he is as a man. So as we're talking to each of them, I'm getting a completely different interview. And they could be, the kids that he had with Juanita. It could be the kids he had with Joanna. It doesn't matter. They all have the same wonderful qualities, which makes sense because they are truly of the same family. And, when his eldest daughter said, well, he married 2 really dynamic women, and they both had so much in common, that, to me, I was blown away by that. I was like, well, she is a very grown woman. If she had feelings, she would express it right now.
Also, big kudos to Joanna, because she worked to make sure
Yes.
that
All of
they
them.
stayed as a family, that she included all the daughters from the previous marriage, and that they were involved in everything that the family was doing.
But it also speaks volumes about him, that he created unique relationships with each.
With both women and each daughter.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a lot of children to have a unique relationship while you're being the biggest movie star in the world and directing and producing and everything else. That's a lot.
6 is a lot. That's a lot.
6 is a lot.
Yeah.
Derik, looking back, did Sidney get to see what you guys were building? How much of the film was completed before he passed away?
No, he did not get to see any of the film. No, we weren't at that stage. We were still finishing off interviews. Editing really hadn't started until after that. We were at very beginning stages of the edit. So unfortunately, no.
And Reginald, you include, I'll never forget seeing In the Heat of the Night and the slap. And him slapping back. And Samuel Jackson speaks about it. Can you tell us about including that into the document?
Well, it's a must. You have to have the
You
slap.
couldn't have a doc
I mean,
without that
we
slap.
played with it at a different place. We're like, do we just start with the slap? Did we just go? This is a movie about pop. Just get it over with. So, but I mean, it is one of the biggest moments in cinema history.
Yeah.
It is up there with, Judy Garland walking into Oz. It is up there with any moment in any movie, I Am Your Father. You can name them all. That is as important as anything ever made in a movie. And the social impact of that moment may make it number one.
Yeah, because Dorothy going into Oz was not as socially impactful.
Sorry, Reg.
Didn't shake up the country that way.
No, this man not. I mean, I hate when I hear people say that he changed black cinema. This man changed cinema.
Yeah, he changed cinema.
He changed the whole thing.
Because in 1967, y'all, my God, when that happened, black people didn't even know what to do. We couldn't even speak about it. It was like, y'all ain't gonna believe what happens in that movie. Remember?
And the key is, it's not just the slap, it's the rapidity of the response.
Yeah.
Because you just slapped Sidney Poitier. You're still mad about that. But before you can get your mad on, pow! He slaps it right back. No.
It's
Don't worry about getting mad.
Yeah.
Settle back.
So, Oprah, I'm dying to ask you, what's your favorite Sidney Poitier film?
It's A Patch of Blue. And it's A Patch of Blue because it was also one of his favorites. And we used to talk about how to do that film at that time, before there was a Civil Rights Act, a Civil Rights Movement, a Civil Rights anything. It was so extraordinary. Mm-hmm. I mean, to be actually seen in the park holding, having lunch, holding court with a white woman at that time. And I liked it because of its simplicity and because it made a resounding statement at the time. That's why I like it so much.
Reggie, what's your favorite, Sidney?
Oh, obviously I love them all. I remember seeing Patch of Blue as a kid, and I mean, just all those movies rocked me. And since I already talked about Buck and the Preacher, I'm going to mention a deep, deep, deep cut. This is a Deep in the Crate reference, which is Brother John, which I remember we went to the Shop City Drive-In to go see Brother John. And we're all sitting there in the car, and we're watching the movie, and I said, hey, Sidney Poitier is Jesus in this movie. This is fantastic. I like what you putting down, Sidney, and I've liked everything, but you just took it to another level. So, Brother John, check it out.
Derik, what's your favorite Sidney film?
I'd have to say to Sir with Love just for the moment that I experienced when I was first, introduced to Sidney, but then I just quickly go over to In the Heat of the Night. Can't help it.
When he passed, I watched a movie every night for like 30 days afterwards. It was my way of comforting myself. And I just couldn't get over how beautiful he was, because I hadn't seen like some of the early ones. I hadn't seen No Way Out. And, I felt the spirit of him in a way that actually brought real comfort to me. It felt like he was abiding with me in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite lines in the movie. My hero, my brother, the late Greg Tate, when he talks about the beauty of Sidney, he goes, he's a Benin bronze.
Yes.
I mean, all those descriptions of just, he's a Yoruba mask. Oh my God. I mean, he puts them in the pantheon of beauty over centuries.
Yeah.
It's spot on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Halle Berry says, I wanted to marry Sidney Poitier.
My fondest memory growing up, I grew up in Panama, and my mom would take me to movies, was Lilies of the Field. And my mom would always sing, He's got the whole world in his hand. He's got the whole world, and I loved him in that. It was so amazing.
Well, thank you for loving our film. Thank you.
Oh my goodness!
Thank you for loving our film.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, gang.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for loving our film.
Thank you.